Return of Donald Trump to the White House marks the beginning of a new chapter in American and global politics. In his second term, his administration is expected to implement bold changes. And Matthew Kroenig is joining us today to break this down for us. He is a professor of government and foreign service at Georgetown University. Thank you so much for being with us this morning.
Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me on.
So what can we expect from Trump's foreign policy this time around? Will it be any different than his first term?
Well, I think some of the underlying philosophy will be the same. This idea of peace through strength in foreign and defense policy, which President Trump talks a lot about. I think in trade, fair and reciprocal trade is what he's aiming for. But I do think one major difference is that he's had time to plan. There's been a more organized transition process. And so I think he'll have a more loyal team of advisors this time. And we just saw two big appointments last night with Marco Rubio as the new Secretary of State and Mike Waltz as the new National Security Advisor. So I'd expect less kind of policy dysfunction than in the first term.
Yeah, and we'll get into some of these in more detail in just a minute. His focus, obviously, on America first, to prioritize U.S. manufacturing, limit outsourcing, slap tariffs on imports. What do his plans mean for global trade, and how could it impact the U.S. economy? Because that really turned out to be the key issue for voters this time around.
Yes, voters certainly focused on the economy. And I think what we saw in the first term is that Trump used tariffs, but not for protectionism in its own sake, but to generate leverage to force trade negotiations. And so I think we'll see the same thing this time, using tariffs and the threat of tariffs to get trade partners to the table to negotiate new trade arrangements. I think the priority is going to be on China, the number 2 largest economy in the world that engages in a number of unfair trade practices. But I also think trade deficits with allies will be something that the Trump administration will want to try to address as well. So yes, definitely the use of tariffs and their threat to bring trading partners to the negotiating table.
And you mentioned his cabinet taking shape as he taps people for these key positions, including his longtime ally, Congresswoman Elise Stefanik of New York. She will serve as the ambassador to the UN. What can we expect from her, especially when it comes to the wars in the Middle East and Ukraine? How do you think she's going to deal with also the nuclear programs of North Korea and Iran?
Yes, well, Elise at the UN, as you point out, and then Marco Rubio at State and Mike Waltz at the NSC. And so coming first to the Middle East, I think that there will be a shift here. If you look at the first term, the Trump administration had a maximum pressure campaign against Iran. And so I think the orientation was to work with Israel and traditional partners in the region against Iran and terrorists. The Biden administration, I think, made the centerpiece of their Middle East policy trying to get a nuclear deal with Iran that didn't really work out. And so I think you'll see a return to this kind of maximum pressure approach, very tough on Iran and more supportive of Israel and partners in the Gulf states.
And he has said that the war in Ukraine never would have happened if he had been in power. He has said that Israel should finish the war quickly, not with a peace deal, but by winning the war. The U.S. obviously has given billions to Israel and Ukraine. When we talk about America first and funding foreign wars, what will his approach be, you think?
Yes, well, he uses this term peace through strength, which was also a Reagan term. And so I think the idea is that the United States should be strong so that adversaries don't mess with us. If they do mess with us, a willingness to punch back. But I think there's also a skepticism for long, drawn-out military conflicts with no clear end in sight. And so I think he is skeptical of the wars in Gaza and Ukraine and wants to bring them to a close. So he said that Israel should finish what they started and get it over with fast. Recently, he said that he hopes they finish it even before he enters office. And then with Ukraine, he's been very clear that he wants to negotiate a peace deal. He said he'd do it within 24 hours, by which I think he means quickly. But I think he'll try to get Putin and Zelensky to the table and try to force an end to the conflict.
Even if that means ceding territory to Putin?
Yeah, well, part of the problem we have is if we let the war play out, Russia's winning right now. Russia's the one taking back territory. So I think the idea that Ukraine is going to win and take back all of its territory, unfortunately, is not really realistic. So I think the best we can do at this point is to try to end the conflict, maybe roughly along the current lines. So Russia would be left occupying part of Ukraine, But my recommendation, for what it's worth, would be not to legitimate that, not say, congratulations, Russia, you invaded Ukraine, you get half the country, but to say you're illegally occupying this part of what is legally Ukrainian territory under international law. And maybe kind of like West Germany during the Cold War, work to bring the rest of Ukraine back together over time.
All right, Professor Kroenig, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.